Thank you. Please be seated. Sacristans today are Groves House grade 8s and 9s, and prefect recognition of the week is Josh Wheeler for his polite and courteous attitude. So please stand and take a round of applause.
Polite and courteous is good. Can you hear me? Is this on at all? Yeah? Okay. Good morning, everyone. We're going to begin with hymn number 18, He Who Would Valiant Be. Hymn number 18. Please stand. Thank you. Very nice. Please be seated. Oh, now the microphone's on. So when's the last time that you took a big risk? Think about that for a second. I was thinking about that for myself, and I thought, well, this is actually what I'm doing right now. I think most of you know that public speaking's a big risk, and I always feel like it's a bit of a risk to get up here. Maybe you'll like what I say, maybe you'll, think I'm an idiot. Too late, I know. But it's a bit of a risk, and it's what makes my job kind of interesting and a little bit exciting, actually. So, there are all kinds of risks. There are physical risks, and there are emotional risks, and there's probably other kinds of risks as well. And as you know, risking is really a kind of essential part of being a teenager, isn't it? It's necessary for you to take risks in your lives. Otherwise, you'd end up, not doing much of anything, really. And so part of the nature of risking is pushing yourself, as I've often said, pushing yourself beyond your comfort level. And so this is why, when you are contemplating doing something that is a risk, this is why it's important to kind of check in with yourself. Check in with yourself to make sure that you're not going to do something that you'll end up wishing you hadn't done. I think you know what I'm talking about. So I've talked about Aristotle before. Aristotle had a great way of talking about virtues. He said that everyone is different and everyone needs to find their place of balance between the extremes. He called it the golden mean. So what do I mean by that? So he said in terms of risking, for instance, on one extreme is taking too little risk. And that results in cowardice, and it results in living a life that's kind of too safe. And so, as I say, you end up not doing very much. And what would the other extreme be? The other extreme is taking too too many kind of risks that really aren't good to take. So Aristotle would say the other extreme is recklessness, where you just do things that are dangerous. And so he said that in between those two things, we all find our balance. And Aristotle says that balance is what real courage is, knowing when to take risks and knowing when not to. And that looks different for each one of us, because each one of us has our own capacity for risk-taking. So Aristotle believed that we all have the capacity to find that place of balance, and I tend to agree. I think we have that capacity in ourselves. But sometimes we can find ourselves in a position where we're not really sure whether a particular risky behavior is good or not, right? And this is not just true for teenagers, it's true for everyone. So adults see a big part of our role as guardians and parents. Part of our role is to kind of warn you about risks that from our perspective are too dangerous. And I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, that adults have this irritating tendency to want to keep you safe. And that's really an area where there's a lot of conflict between adults and teenagers, of course. But again, the issue is, how do we find the balance? How do we find the balance between, as adults, feeling okay about the level of risk that you're taking, and how do you find the balance between kind of trying to listen to us a little bit anyways because we're older, and also making your own decisions? It's all about balance. So one area of life where we are all confronted with constantly making choices about level of risks is the internet. And sometimes we engage in risky behavior on the internet without even knowing that we're taking risks. So not long ago, you've heard these stories, but this happened to me. I was asked to help with an intervention. This was a teenage girl whose family I know, not someone from Shawnigan. And this girl had developed an internet relationship with someone who she believed to be a boy about her age. And so she was sending him pictures of herself and giving him lots of information about herself and not telling her family that this was going on. And so eventually one of this girl's friends started to get worried and told her parents, who in turn told this girl's parents. So to make a long story short, it turned out that the boy that this girl was communicating with wasn't a teenager at all. He was an older man whose intentions were not good, and she was able to cut the relationship off before anything bad happened. So the point that I want to make is that this girl she really knew in her heart of hearts that what she was doing was not good. Otherwise, she wouldn't have gone to such lengths to keep it all hidden from her family. So her intuition, her spidey senses, were working just fine. She just didn't trust herself, or she didn't want to listen to herself. She didn't want to listen to her intuition. She wanted to continue with this behavior, even though she knew probably wasn't very safe. So the biggest issue with risk-taking is trusting. The first thing is trusting yourself. It's trusting that voice that says, maybe this isn't such a good idea, or at least it requires a little more checking out before you jump into this or that particular behavior or decision. And it also involves feeling okay when something feels like it's beyond a reasonable risk, to not do it, And of course, all these things come into play here, peer pressure and pressure on yourself. But these are really the issues around risk-taking. It's knowing when to say, no, this is not good. And when we aren't particularly sure whether a risk is worth taking, we can always ask someone who has been around for longer than us, someone who we trust to give us the straight goods. And someone who always seeks to give us the straight goods is going to add a few comments to what I've said already. Mr. Seabee.
Thank you very much. When the Rev asked me to chip in a little bit about teenagers and risk-taking, the first thing that came to my mind was being a teenager is really, really tough. But I don't need to tell you that. You're living it day in, day out, in the trenches, trying to mold yourselves into the best version that you can be. I was a teenager once, and I remember being a teenager, and it also being really, really tough. Amazing, of course, but tough. We had no internet when I was a teenager. Can you imagine life with no internet? It made things a lot easier, I must say, but that's a conversation for another day. Mr. Robertson was a teenager a long time ago, but he was a teenager, and I'm sure that even Mr. Robertson had some tough times as a teenager. 400 years ago, Shakespeare wrote about the difficulties and the challenges that come with being a teenager. Romeo and Juliet, an obvious case. In The Winter's Tale, Shakespeare writes, "I would there were no age between 10 and 23, or that youth would sleep out the rest, for there is nothing in the between but getting wenches with child, wronging the ancient tree, stealing and fighting." It was tough, even 400 years ago. In fact, our earliest ancestors, the teenagers of those ancestors, also found it tough. And this is where risk comes in. And something, maybe some of you know this, but I'll just bear with me. Back in those days, no family planning or contraception. The family cave got pretty full pretty quickly. And so teenagers, the adolescent cave men and women, were genetically programmed to push away their parents when physically they could take care of themselves and go off, leave the family cave, gravitate towards people about their own age, some of which might be potential mates in the future. And you are programmed, those teenagers were programmed to take risks, to be able to learn through trial and error. And this experiential learning, that was the earliest, which funnily enough, that idea of learning through experience is making a big comeback, and it makes sense. So you are programmed to take those risks in order to learn. Obviously, the consequences have changed since those days, but it's an interesting point to understand about why teenagers are linked so inextricably with risk-taking. As educators, we here are always trying to correct, to shape, to guide, and to mold you. However, it's not lost on us how well and how amazingly capable you are at managing that intersection between risk and being sensible. Speaking for myself, I'm particularly impressed by how you can respond to us saying you're safe to take risks here. You must not fear failure in this situation. Then, nope, not there. Don't risk there. It's a difficult message to take on. Like I said, being a teenager is difficult. But you, for the vast majority of the time, do step up and ask what we are doing. And that is really, really impressive. Like the Rev said, you know, those spidey senses, or that ability to know when a risk is worth taking or when you're doing something that is just not worth it. And that's what it comes down to. So listen to yourselves and listen to your friends. So what does it all mean? I think it's really important that you understand yourself and the amazing journey that you are on. It is tough, there's no doubt about that, but you talk to anybody and it does get better. It does make more sense. It is easier as you push through those teenage years. And of course, like the Rev said, ask for help if you're unsure that the risks that you are taking are worth it. And as I've challenged you to do before, take care of each other. And if you see somebody who's taking a risk that's not worth the possible consequences, it's your responsibility, no matter who you are, to step in and lend your advice to the situation.
Thank you, Mr. Seaby. So, it's trust, really, I think is what both of us are talking about this morning. Trusting yourself, trusting others, trusting that, we're in a community where we all have each other's best interests at heart. So lots to think about this morning. We're going to end with the Ripley's House hymn number 8, I Hear Thy Welcome Voice. Please stand.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Some good messages this morning, some good discussion topics to be followed up on. If somebody could just bring me my walker, I'll go down the aisle. Thank you.